Cool. So I think we'll get started now. So this is the events training session, and this is the second we've ran today. So if you did come earlier, it is the same session, but to everyone else who's here now, thanks for joining us, and we'll just go through what this session's about. So just a reminder that this session is going to be recorded and then uploaded afterwards. So if you want to turn your cameras off, please do so now, as this session is being recorded. The slides and the video recording will be available on our resources page and on our YouTube channel very shortly afterwards. Just once we've got it edited, it can go up. We recommend that for this session that you do take notes. We will have someone managing the chat function if you've got questions throughout. Then we will be holding a live Q&A session at the end for anything you've got related to this session, though the content from this is made up from frequently asked questions from students over the years. So if it's not answered, it may come up in the following slide. So who are we? We're the activities department, and we work with all clubs, societies and other avenues, but to enable you to put on events, compete in competitions and carry out volunteering opportunities, plus a lot more throughout the year. This training, along with the other training sessions we're running, are designed to make you as autonomous as possible. And there are some key details that we do just need to go over, as they require legal bits, but we just want to make sure that you're informed and understand what you're getting into in part of your role, so you can feel as comfortable as possible throughout your time as a committee member. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask throughout in the chat function, or you can wait to the end. And made up from previous key questions from exec, so they should be in this slide as we go through.
Cool, thank you. Just before we go on to this slide, we do also have Rachel Brown from the safeguarding team from the university side of things here with us today, who will talk a little bit. She's just got her picture on there. Who will be talking a bit more about our process with external speakers and what you need to be doing when you are submitting them if you want them to come to your events. That comes up around about the middle. So if you have any questions that you can think of, get them ready for when she basically finishes speaking about her a little bit. She might answer them in what she says anyway, but it's always good to have some questions ready. Cool. So the general event process that we have, you'll decide your room or your venue where you want to have your event. And then if we go to the left side first, if it's on campus, then you can choose for it to either be in Sub-Zero base, top bar, basically one of the SU controlled places that we have. There's a type form that is on the student exec resources page, and then you can basically put in your request there and it will be processed by the venues team. They're going to let you know basically what all the costs involved will be, and that sort of liaise with you about what you're going to want at your event. So anything else to like dress up the room, make it look nice, and let you know all the costs. And then you can decide whether you want to proceed with that booking, and then you'll go with them and liaise with them to confirm all the different specifics for your event. If you're looking for a normal teaching room that's on campus, then you will have to submit your risk assessment, and that can be either before you put in your room booking request or at the same time as you submit your room booking request, just as long as it's around that same kind of time, because we will not be processing any room bookings if we haven't got that risk assessment in for you first. But we will talk a little bit more about how to do risk assessments a little bit later on. After that, then all you need to just do at that point is just to monitor your emails for a room confirmation. They might need CTO. They will allocate the room for you. That's the central timetable office. That's the university side of things. Because basically, once it comes to us, if we have that risk assessment and it's been approved, then we authorize the room booking to go ahead, and then they will give you that room allocation. And then you can liaise with them from that point onwards if there's anything you need to change. And then to the right hand side, you've got off campus. So if it's somewhere you've got an offer maybe from somewhere off campus to hire a space with them, or you maybe want to look at a different place, maybe in town somewhere, you can discuss a price and conditions with the venue, just as long as you never ever sign a contract or make any form of agreement. It always has to be us or one of us in the staff team that signs any official contracts. They will then they will send that agreement or the contract over to us, obviously SU Socs or Blaze, depending if you're a club or a society, or they can relay that information back to you, and then we will write up our own agreement and then send it off to the venue for signing. So we just need to know all the information, so price, dates, any kind of different clauses that they want in there or that we want. We'll have to put that all into an agreement and then get it signed off by all parties. Once that contract or agreement is done by us and it's all signed by all parties, it will be then up to you and the venue to do the risk assessment. Obviously, as it's their venue, it's their responsibility to create a safe risk assessment that can keep everyone protected. Once that's done, you need to send it back to us so that we can have a look over and just add anything else if we want it in there. But normally, if it's a good venue managed by good people and are good at their jobs, they will be doing a good risk assessment. And then after the event has happened, you'll just then need to report to us as soon as possible if there's been anything that's gone on that's that we need to be made aware of. So if anyone's got any injuries or anything kind of has happened that could cause like reputational damage to the SU or whatever it might be, you just have to let us know. But we never have that. Nothing usually ever goes wrong. So fingers crossed that continues. If you want to book larger rooms on campus, so the Ivor Crew is an example, or EBS, I don't know what room it is, but the one that's straight in the left as you walk in, that's like the huge dome. They can be booked. They'll be a lot harder to book, and you'll have to answer kind of the following questions. This is not us that tries to get these questions. This is the university side of things. They'll need to know when the event is and the day of the week, and sort of point in term is going to be really, really crucial. So if you're trying to get things close to the end of a term or the start of term, it's more often than not going to be a no, because they're going to be really jam-packed full of events already. What time is the event? And this goes for any room bookings, and we'll touch on it again later, but if you can make it after 6 p.m, you've got much higher chance of getting the room that you want. Before 6 is usually going to be a no, just because of teaching hours. How many people are expected to attend the event? And again, this is a crucial one. If you've got expected attendance of 500, then you're more likely to get Ivor Crew lecture hall, because that's one of the only rooms on campus that will be able to hold an attendance as big as that. But if you want the Ivor Crew and you've only got an expected attendance of 100, it's going to be near on impossible to get the Ivor Crew, because they're always going to come back to you and ask, why can't it be LTB6? Why can't it be a smaller room like that? And then also what setup they would require. We as staff, we don't know how to put all the seats back in the Ivor Crew, and I'm sure none of you do either. So we need to get the porters in, and there will be additional costs. So if like all the bleachers need to go back, then the porters will have to come in probably about 2 or 3 hours before your event starts. Maybe even at the start of the day, they sometimes do it. But all those details will be need to know, just so that we can get the room booked for you, hopefully. Events off campus. So yeah, as I mentioned before, don't enter any agreements or contracts with external companies. We need to do everything in terms of that. You might have to pay additional costs or a deposit to secure a venue in town. So for those of you that maybe were in the finance training as well yesterday, you will have to go through all the same ways of making those payments. And again, if you're unsure, then speak to us. Or if you are like an events officer, which I'm sure some of you here are right now, then it might be worth just speaking with your finance officer or your treasurer, whatever their title is within your society, just to see what the processes are, just to give yourself enough time to make sure all these payments go through, so that you can get your event running smoothly. If you are attempting to ever book a venue off campus, just try and give us at least 3 weeks notice. If not longer, that would be really, really great. Yeah, I said earlier, we often need time to kind of liaise with external companies. Some venues will put in really, really dodgy clauses in their contracts, which basically will shift any liability with injuries onto us, or at least they'll try to do that. And then we read through and we don't like it, and we won't sign those kind of contracts. This happened with a place in town a couple of years ago. And basically they were trying to put in a clause that would remove any blame on them for death, even if it was their fault. So we basically just were not happy at all to sign that. And the event ended up, it couldn't go ahead. But if it had about a week extra notice on what we had, it probably would have been able to go ahead, but we just did not end up having enough time. So just get everything in to us at as much notice as possible. The last bit on there, I said, as a general rule, if a company is offering you a deal that seems too good to be true, then it probably is. Going back to that example I just gave, they were basically offering their space to a society for free, just going to take a cut of the profits from drink sales. Which isn't too much of a good deal to be true. A lot of places will do that, but it's very unlikely that you won't have to pay any fee on top of a profit share. So it turned out basically, yeah, that it was too good to be true, and there were going to be things in place that just blocked us from being able to authorise that. Cool, back to you, Liv.
Okay, so with funding events, pretty straightforward, but making sure that you have the money in order to put on your event beforehand. So make sure you have a plan and you know that all the costs that are going to be involved, but all that your members are happy with these costs and what they're signing up for. So we recommend that you gauge an interest from your members before starting to make purchases for your event. For instance, you could end up only selling 30 tickets to an event you thought you said 50 at, and therefore you won't have enough money to buy everything you want for your event. So find out what members want, get a gauge of how much they would want to spend on an event, etc., before you start purchasing stuff for it. With societies, you do not have any restrictions when it comes to spending. Whatever money is in your account is yours to use for your events, but with the exemptions of not buying alcohol or illegal substances, as mentioned in the training yesterday. Though for clubs, you have set money that you can use. You can't use your budgeted funds for the year, but you can use your savings, which are accrued over your years as a club. You cannot use expected income to buy things. So for example, if you know you've already sold 10 tickets at £10 each for an event, you can't use this £100 minus VAT to buy anything until the money has cleared and is displayed in your weekly finance report. All web sales are processed at the end of each month. So if you made your tickets for an event on the 6th of October, you won't have this money until the start of November. So again, make sure you're planning months in advance when it comes to this. So with funding and sponsors, if you can hold fundraising events for your club or society or for charities, be aware that you'll still need to fill out a separate event permissions form, and this is found at the Estates Help Desk, and you'll especially need to fill this in if you require electricity for your event and extra bits, as it takes slightly longer. When starting your fundraising event, make sure you take a cash flow. A float is fundamentally change and money that you'll have. If someone came over with a £5 note and it only costs £2, you'll need to give them that £3 change. The SU cannot provide a float, so make sure between yourself and your other committee exec members that you have provided this beforehand, and get someone else to count it up and double check the money that is there, just so that there's no disputes or disagreements at the end of the event when you take out the money you started with. When you've collected the money at the end of the event, hand the money over to a treasurer who will be in charge of paying the money in, because that's their role. We encourage you to look for companies to sponsor your events, and as long as they do not clash with any of the SU outlets or policies, it will all be good and handy. But remember never to sign a contract or personally agree to anything. Remember, this can happen by email, Facebook message, or even speaking to someone face to face. Companies sometimes view these as agreements in a formal contract, and we just want to protect you guys before you go into it. It is up to you to search for these sponsors, so be proactive, ask around. We would recommend maybe venues in town or emailing different departments across the university. The worst anyone can do is say no, but it's about you guys being proactive with it and finding fundraising sponsors. So for anyone that was in the finance training yesterday, we went through click funding, but for anyone who wasn't, I'll go through it again. The link is there, so when you've got the slides later, you can click onto it. But click funding is basically a project that's run in tandem with the university, and you can pick the project that you're going to raise money for, and you set yourself a goal of the financial amount you want to receive. Let's just say you wanted to raise £250 and 250 people all donated £1 towards your cause. Then the university's click funding scheme will match that amount, so you'll end up with £500 for your cause. When you set up a click project, you have to give a time scale of when it's going to be open for. So if you set it for 3 weeks and you don't reach your £250 minimum target by then the money goes back to the people who have donated towards your cause, as you have to reach your minimum target beforehand. And if you have set your time scale as 3 weeks and it's only and you reach it in week 1, you don't get the money at week 1. You have to wait until the time period's completed in order for you to get the money through click funding. But it's a great way to double up the money that you're raising funds for if it is quite an expensive event or thing you need to purchase. And the Click team will generally ask you to make some slight changes. This is quite normal, it just needs to be done in a certain way. So just give yourself a bit of extra time to get the money in, and the money won't be visible in your finance report. So just make sure you track how much you have left throughout.
Cool. So ticketing events, us in the student activities team, the staff team, we can create tickets for you that your members can buy from your society or club webpage, or non-members can buy. On the exec member resources page, which is a little link to again at the bottom there, you can use the type form. If you click on that button, you can use a type form to let us know all of the details of these tickets that you'd like. So you can let us know like different tickets. So like I said earlier, one for members could be £3, and then one for non-members, so guests outside of the university, could be £5. Basically, you can just let us know what you want, and we can put it on there for you. Ticket income from web sales goes straight into your club or your society account. Obviously, VAT will be deducted unless the event is all for charity. So if you're doing an event where the ticket proceeds go to a different charity, then VAT will not be deducted. But if it's just for your society or your club, then VAT will be deducted. If there's more than one society or club collaborating in your event, we can add different ticket types so that members of specific societies or clubs can buy the right ones. But it doesn't ever stop people from buying the wrong ticket, and then it means that someone might have paid for a ticket thinking they were buying one for the French Connection Society. They actually meant to buy one for the Law Society, for example. So what we usually say is just have one ticket type. It'll all go into one society or club's funds. And then you, as all the different exec teams, you can agree on the profit share, and then we can then basically let our finance team know that they need to move certain money over to certain society or club funds. That's usually the easier way to do it. You don't have to, but we usually just ask you to steer clear of using different ticket sites. So Eventbrite is an example. There's always a risk that the person that sets up your event could also just keep some of the portion of the profits, which is not something that obviously you want as a society or a club. But it also, these third-party sites, they will take a percentage of the income. Whereas if you sell tickets through the SU website, you'll get 100% of the income, obviously minus the VAT. We don't take any money. It all goes straight to your society or your club. So yeah, we just don't want really you to lose money that you could be used to put into future events. Yeah, and also you'll be subject to VAT twice if you do that. So not only will that external site take a cut of your profits, you'll also get be subject to VAT in that initial pay when they like the initial payment on there, and then when you then pay money back into the SU, it'll be subject to VAT again. So you'll basically lose 2 lots of VAT as well as a profit share from the company themselves. Food and drink at events. So if you're having food and drink at your events, you need to make sure that it's been cooked, stored, handled and served safely, especially whilst COVID is still ongoing. If you want to cook something yourself, so if you want to just make some cakes, for example, you'll need to have at least a level 2 food hygiene certificate and provide a copy of this to us before you can hold your event. On that same, oh god, we've lost the lights in the office. They're automatic lights. Thank you. On the student activities exec page that I mentioned earlier, there is a link to a cheap course that you can do. You don't have to do that particular course. You can do some other one that you can find if there's a cheaper one. But that's just one that we've got linked for you. And you can then get this reimbursed through your club or society funds. And again, you can just ask your finance, you can ask your treasurer or your president about how you can claim that money back if you're not too sure. All food and drink items, they do need to be labelled with their ingredients. And if they are vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, etc. Just really important just to make sure that everyone stays safe and is not eating anything that they don't want to eat at events. You might also want attendees to sign disclaimers before they eat. An example that we have is a couple of years ago, society wanted to do a food eating competition. But obviously if someone had experienced like sickness or diarrhea, for example, in the last 48 hours, taking part in a food competition might give them a bad reaction, not to mention then if you bring in like spicy food or things that are notorious for kind of upsetting people's stomachs. So you might ask people to sign disclaimers before they eat food at events. Alcohol will only be permitted at events such as socials if a society and club adheres to the alcohol policy. which will be being sent round either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week, hopefully, to all presidents to sign. Your funds can't be spent on alcohol unless we permit it, so please ask us before if you want to do that. You don't have to ask us if you want it to be, if it's something that's like included in the price of a meal. So like a lot of societies will have a society, it'll be like a society or club meal before the winter break. If it's like £30 for a meal and that includes a drink on arrival or a drink with your meal, then that's totally fine. It just means obviously like everyone has to pay their money into the SU's bank details, so that you can then make that payment to, say, like a restaurant that is doing a group order for you. But you can't, for example, open a tab with a bar and then ask them to invoice us for that. If it's solely on alcoholic drinks, then we cannot permit any payments for that. Liv.
Cool. So risk assessments, all your regular and one-off activities and events.
You're a bit quiet, Liv. Just letting you know.
Better now?
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, okay. So all your regular one-off activities and events must have approved risk assessments. This also applies to online events when you're doing physical activity like a Zoom dance class. Before it can go ahead, we'll not authorise any of the room bookings until we have received your risk assessment. Once you've done a risk assessment and sent it over to us, we can make the amendments and ask you to check over it. So please make sure you give plenty of time just so that these can get approved and it doesn't uphold your event for any reason. For reoccurring events, you can either send us the same risk assessment with just the updated date whenever you submit a room booking, or you can send one risk assessment that includes all the same dates that the same event will be taking place on with your room booking request. This is only the case if the events are the exact same week in, week out. So if the board games, if you're playing board games at your event, then you're doing this week in, week out, then it'll be the same risk assessment. Though if your event changes at all, you will need to submit a separate risk assessment just so it makes sure it covers your whole activity. If you hold events without a risk assessment being approved beforehand, your club or society could face suspension, as the risk assessment is one of your agreements in being a club or society. So this is a little breakdown of how it works. So section 1, you just have to answer on what the hazards are, what the hazardous event is, and the consequence. And please make sure you always list all 3 components. The next bit is who might be harmed. Generally, it'll be anyone in attendance, but there may be certain things that only affect certain people at the event. So if there was a band playing, probably only the artist up by the equipment will be affected by the hazard, being like the wires or the instruments, for example, and not everyone else at the event. For current controls, this is what you currently have in place to minimize the risk. And then the current risk L times C equals R is done through the likelihood / the consequence, which is the grid at the top. So you just go along, and if you think it's a moderate consequence and you think it's quite unlikely, then overall it's a low risk event. The next bit is about additional controls that will be needed to reduce the event. And these are things that you could do further to minimize the risk. And then you look at, once you've put the additional controls in that are reducing the risk in to the likelihood and consequence, that is your residual risk, which is more than likely to be lower than the original risk because you've got extra steps in place. But there are some events where whatever you do, it will probably stay quite consistent in the risk level throughout. And then 7 is the target date. So what do you plan to have this risk, when do you plan to have this risk managed by? If the risk is food and you're cooking the night before the event and the risk could be cross-contamination, you'll find this out once you've labelled all the items, and that would generally be the day before. And then the date that it's achieved, that it generally being the end, at the end of the, this could end up being the target date if you forward planned well. So it could be before your target date, or it's more than likely to be the day of your event. So yeah, with virtual risk assessments, this is if you're doing something physical via Zoom. These will need to be done, but they're really short. It's just to protect everyone involved. So the things that you should include are around space. So do the participants have enough large and hazardous space? What can be done for them to make their space safer? And do the participants live with someone who can help them in case of an emergency? And the session leaders should work out the dimensions of the space that is recommended and ask at the beginning of the session that everyone's got that space that is recommended in order to join in. The conditions, so our participants work in a space that is warm or cool enough or well ventilated, and the experience is around the level of the class. So are the participants who are attending experienced enough to be carrying out what the class is about? So maybe think of different levels, intermediate, beginner, advanced, in order to make sure it's slightly safer for still including beginner level people, but it's safe for them as well. So this is a little example of what a virtual risk assessment would look like. You've just got to fill in the boxes, which are quite straightforward, with title, location, the number, the person, the contact details, and then it'll have a date which is signed, and a date generally it'll be reviewed, and the similar format with the current risk, residual risk, and write down the hazards at the bottom. Oh, sorry, that's still me. For a COVID risk assessment, this could be for an in-person club or society activity. But the only exemption for this is if it's a sports club and it's your regular fixtures and training, your current risk assessment is including of this stuff. But also on top of this, you'll need to make sure that not just the university and government guidelines are taken into account, but also checking your sport and governing body regulations. We know over last year they changed quite regularly, so just double check, because at the end of the day you are compliant. You have to be compliant with the national governing body no matter what the government and university guidelines are. You need to make sure you're doing those steps on top of everything as well. You can find the risk assessment template on the Student Activities exec help page. It's just in the little triangle with the exclamation mark, and that's where you can download it and fill it all in, send it over to us to get it approved, and then you can get started with your event.
Cool, thank you. So we also have the event permission form. I say we have it. The Estates Help Desk on the uni side of things, they have it. So if you're doing something outside on campus, especially if it involved music, electricity, food and drink, or something a little bit more out of the ordinary, so a little bit maybe something more dangerous that might require some extra risks, then you'll need to fill in this estates form and send it to us for signing. Once we've signed it, we'll email to let you know that it's ready to be collected, and then you take it up to the Estates Help Desk. Obviously, at the moment, we just we would advise you to email it to us, and so we can sign it through email and get it back to you. It's quicker and more COVID friendly. Usually 3 weeks notice will be required depending on your event, and music can only be played between 12 and 2, and then also after 5:30, probably even 6 o'clock now, because a lot of teaching events are now going on until 6. And there's a link at the bottom there so that you can download that and go through that as well. So external speakers, so societies and clubs can invite external speakers to their events, so long as you fill out an external speaker submission form, and that's the link. That will be changing probably at some point in the future, and Rachel will talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. Most requests are processed with a minimal background check on the attendee, but please be aware that some requests might take longer to process. The example I gave earlier, and I'll give it again now, is Boris Johnson. There's obviously like a very high risk with inviting him onto campus because of protests and further things that could happen if he was to come to campus. So this will require at least 15 working days notice, probably more even for someone like that though. Let's just allow for thorough background checks, communications with the attendee to make sure they know what's expected of them and where they need to go to and the routes they need to take, etc. And also for us to liaise with you as a society or club, just to make sure that you know what the safety procedures are, what we're liaising maybe with like the security department, all those kind of things. So at least 3 weeks notice, but ideally longer. The university and SU, we fully support freedom of speech. So we aim to make every request happen. But in certain instances where the event or the attendee falls out of line with our own policies, or even just obviously the wrong side of the law, we will potentially reject some requests. Really important, but you can't advertise your event at all until an external speaker request has been approved. This again comes in line with like safety procedures. If you're telling the public, anyone can view your Instagram accounts, for example. If you're telling the public that Boris Johnson is coming to campus next week, then there's going to be a load of media that are going to attend. There's potential threats that could happen, and at that point we haven't approved with you that the certain security and the right safety provisions have been put in place. So you really cannot advertise an event until all external speaker requests, all elements of it, have been approved. The request will still need to be completed, even if it's a virtual one. Obviously, the risks are significantly less, but there are still risks associated with virtual events. And alumni also count as external speakers. So even if they're attending, you will still need to complete the form. I'll pass over to Rachel now, who's going to give you a lot more information on this. And if you have any questions, then you can pop them in the chat now for her, or you can wait until after she's finished speaking, and there'll be a little section just where she'll answer some questions for you. Cool. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Jack. And I'm loving your scenario with Boris Johnson, because I have visions of him, like, zip wiring over Square 3 or something, and that poses a whole pile of other risks that we would have expected. So my name is Rachel Brown. I am the compliance manager for safeguarding at the university, and part of my role is to have oversight of the external speaker notification and approval process. So that includes our external speaker code of practice as well. So if anyone has submitted external speaker notifications before this year, then you might be familiar with some of this process already. But just to put it into a bit of context, the notification and approval process has been in existence now for about 5 years. And the process really acts like a risk assessment to ensure that all events take place safely and securely and remain within the law. So we require all event organisers, regardless of whether they are a member of staff or whether they are a student, to notify the university of all external speakers that they intend to invite to speak or to participate in an event. And to help us to help you, we do require that you submit your notification at least 15 working days. So that's 3 weeks, or at least 15 working days prior to your event. And I'll mention this at least a few times, because it's really helpful to us and to you if we get that received as soon as possible, because sometimes there are risks involved with an external speaker that we might not realise right at the beginning, and we need that time to be able to mitigate those risks in order to support you for that event to happen. And it's important to remember that the notification process applies to all events, so whether that's taking place on campus or whether that's taking place online. And when I talk about safety and security, the events taking place and they remain within the law, some examples of that maybe is, as Jack said, that there are speakers that may attract protest, that you might want to invite a high profile speaker such as Boris Johnson, or your speaker might tell them that they're bringing their own security with them, for example. So there are initial risks that we might recognise. We also are very much about promoting academic freedom and freedom of speech for all. And if you're not familiar with the university's policy on academic freedom and freedom of speech, then that's one that you really need to have a look at. It's important as part of this process. So take a few minutes to have a read through that. It is only 1 page long, so it is really short for a policy. Some examples of where this might come into play for it might be where the speaker is considered contentious, where their views may infringe the law, that they think that someone may think that the content of the speech might be upsetting, or where you might be asked to segregate your audience, for example. There's numerous amounts of legislation that we as a university and the Student Union are to comply with, and these include things like the Equality and Diversity Act, the Public Sector Equality Duty, the Human Rights Act, the Public Disorder Act, the Prevent Duty. So there's a lot of governance around this area that we're obliged to comply with. We don't expect you to understand that legislation. It is summarised very well in that policy on academic freedom and freedom of speech that you'll hopefully have a quick look through. So when you submit your online external speaker notification form, this kicks off the risk assessment process that the SU conduct. And there are times when that information will then be shared with the university for us to do a second and follow-up review. You'll need to wait for the outcome of your review regardless before you can confirm your speaker and begin to advertise your event, and Jack's already mentioned that as well. And as I say, the sooner you put in your notification and the sooner you work within that 15 working day notice period, then the easier that process becomes. The external speaker process really sort of sets out what our review process is and what our requirements are. So before you organise an event, and invite a speaker, it's important that you have a look at the code of practice. I'll put, I can, somewhere in here, let me just put the link to, there we go, which is now in the chat, which is the landing page for the external speaker online form, and that will give you the links to the Policy and Academic Freedom, Freedom of Speech, the External Speaker Code of Practice, and also the Equality and Diversity Framework. And you'll be asked to share those links with your external speakers before they come to the university, so they know what we're expecting. Depending on the outcome of your risk review, the SU and the university might consider conditions to be placed on your event to make sure that they happen safely, securely, and remain within the law. So that might be, for example, that we might ask that you appoint an impartial chair to your event to make sure that you promote freedom of speech. We might ask that you contact and work with the head of security and campus safety in order to make sure that obviously we look at the security and safety of the event, and also to mitigate any reputational risks. We might ask you to work with communications and external relations team at the university, and they're really experienced at putting together quite high profile and contentious events such as the Think series. We might ask you also for your event to be ticketed. It's also important that we listen and we recognise the concerns that others might have about our speaker, or your speaker, rather than my speaker, your speaker, and the speaker you've selected. And so another condition may be that we require you to provide support or signpost to support service and wellbeing services. We're not expecting you to know all this information, and please don't be put off, especially if you've got some really fabulous ideas around speakers that you want to invite this year. It's not too complicated, I promise, but it's important that you understand what's required when you want to invite a speaker, and what's required about submitting the notification and in the timely manner within, making sure that we're meeting that 15 working day notice period is really helpful as well. The university and the SU, we're really lucky. Jack, Ray and I talk on a frequent basis, and it's really there to help support you in your events that are taking place. And our aim is really not to shut down, but to make sure that we can make sure events happen and safely and securely and remain within the law. I know that the SU are one step ahead of the university, and you've got a WYSI toolkit coming out, which is really helpful again for your event management stuff, and I know Jack's going to talk about those. For those of you that are familiar with the online form, you will notice some changes to that form that are happening later on in the year, and there'll be some comments coming out about that as well. But part of that will be that a new element of that form will be that you will be conducting your own risk assessment as well as the risk assessments that the SU and the university will do. That's sort of it in a nutshell from me. It's quite a lot of information to take in, but most importantly, welcome back. And I hope that you have a fabulous year and some really exciting events and external speakers in this coming year. Nice to see everyone back on campus soon. And any questions, put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. We'll have a really awkward sort of 10-15 seconds now, just in case anyone's got any questions. You can unmute yourself and ask them, but if not, then we'll crack on with the rest.
And if you don't, otherwise just pop them in the chat, and Jack will feed them back to me later, and I can always answer questions then.
And obviously, if you have any questions that you think of after this training session, please just get in contact with us, and then we'll pass them on to Rachel as well.
Rachel, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
You were talking about speakers and organising events. Is it correct that if we want an alumni to attend, it needs to go through the alumni team?
Doesn't have to go through not that I'm aware of. I don't know what your processes are at the SU. I'm not aware it does.
No, we don't have any specifics about that as well. We just accept the only rule that we have is alumni count as well as external speakers, so it just needs to go through the same system. Yeah,
it needs to go through the external speaker process, and there's a bit in the code of practice to make mention to that, but I'm not aware that it has to go through the alumni service. It might be that out of a courtesy you might want to make them aware so they know what's going on, but other than that I'm not aware of a process for that at all. No.
Yeah, the same as Rachel. I think they just like to know out of curiosity, but you don't have to.
No.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Cool. Anyone else at all? No? Cool. No. In which case, thank you very much, Rachel, for coming to both sessions.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I'll see you soon. Take care.
See you later. Bye-bye. Cool. So cracking on. So room bookings, when you complete the online room booking form, it will be forwarded to us in the student activities team. So it comes to us first of all, and then we will either sponsor the event or email you for more information. Once we have then sponsored it, it will then be sent to the central room bookings, so CTO, that department in the university, who will then allocate a room for you. Please keep in mind these following things when you complete that form. So as I've said a couple of times now, we won't authorise a room booking unless you've sent in a completed risk assessment. You've got to use your University of Essex email address. We will look for this as well, and if we see like a non-Essex email address, we won't be able to authorise anything. And likewise, if we miss it for whatever reason, the CTO will then also pick up on that and not be able to authorise a room booking and won't be able to allocate you a room. Again, yeah, the 3 weeks notice period for external speakers that we've gone through. Please try to make your room bookings at least 2 weeks in advance. Any bookings made less than 3 working days are really likely to not be able to be processed. Sometimes we do need a little bit longer to process a request for you. That might be for a number of reasons. So, you know, in as much advance as you can do those, the better. The general rule is that you can't book a room before 6 p.m. I mentioned that again already. This is just because of teaching times. There might be a load of free rooms on campus, but you're likely, if you book a room say at 5 o'clock, even if the room is free, you're likely to be next to somewhere where teaching is happening. And obviously, society or club activities, they're usually going to probably have a little bit of noise with them. You might want to play music, and for that reason, they'll very, very rarely approve any room bookings before 6 p.m. Sometimes there are certain reasons as to why you might need an event before 6 p.m. That could be like commuting students. They're not able to get like a train home after 6 p.m. You might need, you know, student parents, they might want to have that event earlier because they can't get childcare in the evening. Those kinds of things, they might be reasons why they're accepted. Again, it's not always a guaranteed. There might not be anywhere possible for your events to be able to happen without disrupting teaching. But those reasons need to be clearly stated on your booking form. I think, if I'm right, there is a section for some additional info, and that you can put basically this information on there, or else the request is just flat out going to be rejected, unfortunately. Please make sure that you leave all the rooms clean and tidy and in the same layout as you found the room. You know, every year we do get a couple of times when CTO get back to us and say that there's been rubbish left on the floor, or the rooms have not been left in the same layout, which is really important for certain types of teaching. And your society or club could face a temporary ban on making bookings if anything goes wrong. If anything is wrong with the room, you know, it's important to note when you get there, please take pictures of it when you get there so that there is no blame attached to you. Please don't contact central room bookings, that department directly. All communication must go through to us, apart from when you do get allocated your room. If after that point you'd like to maybe change your room booking, or you'd like to cancel it, then you can contact the central timetable and office. Table and venue booking. So again, we'll be able to offer this again this year with events in person being allowed again. You can use that type form that's linked for the table bookings. So that's maybe if you're doing like a bake sale, I always use that example, but if you're doing a bake sale on Square 3, you're going to want to have a table to put those cakes on. I think you can also use that same form for a gazebo. If not, we will look into adding that as an option on there. Venue booking forms, again, if you wanted to, you know, top bar, base, Sub-Zero, etc., wherever it might be, you can use that form to request to have an event in one of those venues. And then, as was in like slide 4, I believe it was, you'll have the certain process that will follow after you submit that. And then the events toolkit. So this is something that Ray and one of our colleagues, Rob, has been working on together. This should make creating events really, really easy for you. It basically is a website that's linked there, that's got everything on it that you're going to need to put on an event. This, include everything. So risk assessments. Once you click all those individual little tabs on there, there'll be a little drop-down section that is just in the final process of being updated with those correct links at the moment. They'll have all the links on there. So when you click risk assessments, there'll be a link to download the risk assessment template. Booking a space, it will direct you to a link that will take you to the room booking website, etc., etc. So basically, you can use this for everything you need. as well as some extra bits of advice. So, accessibility, and just some general help, all that kind of stuff. So a massive thank you to Ray and to Rob for putting that together, because it's going to hopefully be really, really helpful this year. Back to you, Liv.
Cool. So just some events to get involved in that require no risk assessment from you guys, because these are events organised by the SU. So for clubs, pretty well known that Fed happens every Wednesday and is a night in Sub-Zero celebrating the wins or forgetting about the almost wins. It's not just open to Blaze clubs. All students can go like with any Sub-Zero event, but just one with fancy dress themes, so you can tie in a social with that when you're planning it. But also for our venues team, we've got some new events happening every week, part of the SU. So there's going to be Fed Extra Time, which is going to be in the SU bar before Sub-Zero opens on a Wednesday. So yeah, they'll have basically a pre-Fed happening in the bar. So a place where you can meet with people from your club or get first years to come along, new members, and just a social atmosphere there, as we know squares can get quite cold on a late Wednesday night. And because there's always been a night dedicated to sport, as it's after Bucks, there's now Socks Saturdays. So during Freshers Fortnight, there's a karaoke themed one and drinks deals for all society members. But what the venues team really want is this night to be completely customizable by you guys as the members of society. So if there's something you'd like to see happening as part of Socks Saturday, do get in contact with them, because they'll be on every Saturday for the year. So yeah, some really exciting opportunities, because I had it not just because it's my job, but club societies are from the most important bits as part of not just the SU but life at Essex as a whole. So some nights dedicated to all of you. So for promotion requests, we're always happy to promote your social media or posts that you want via social media platforms, but as we don't log in every single day, especially with Instagram stories, this stuff can get missed, which is never our intention. So what we have done is put together a social media request form, which is really quick and easy, but it's just via the exec help page, and you can let us know if there are big events coming up that will need sharing about, or if you've got any posts that are definitely happening, then we can make sure that there is someone on the social media account to do that for you, just so we don't miss anything. If you do want to DM us privately or tag us, please do so. If we're logged in, we'll definitely share it for you. But yeah, if it's something big, about big event, then do send in the form. So consent and bystander training, we don't have the dates for these yet, as these are coming from the university, but this is a really exciting project. I think it's really good that the university is putting on a part of their Demand for Change group. They've arranged with for a consent and bystander intervention workshops with Essex Police, helping equip you with skills needed to help those around you who may be being sexually harassed. Not only do the workshops teach people the skills to help diffuse situations or sexual harassment, but also aims to give you the confidence in speaking up if someone uses victim-blaming language or racist, sexist or homophobic language. Once we get these dates, these will be sent out to presidents, welfare officers and social secretaries for each sports club and society to complete. We know that a lot of your members may through the year come and contact you about some of these issues, which can be quite sensitive, but we want to equip you as exec in your committee to feel comfortable and confident in signposting in this next session. So this is just helping prepare you guys so you're not in an uncomfortable situation later down the year if something was to come up. But also I think it's really good that the university is investing in educating, but not just club societies, but all students at the university about this. But yeah, we just want to make sure you guys as exec members are on it and have it done, just so you feel more comfortable and confident in your roles as well. And then socials. So yeah, for social events and gatherings should be conducted within the COVID-19 and latest government guidelines, and also the clubs and societies and individuals responsible not adhering to the government and university guidelines and COVID measures will be subject to disciplinary action. This is part of the code of conduct. But also virtual socials are still really important. Not everyone's back in campus yet. There are a lot of students who are quarantining, so it could be a really nice time now to get them involved. If you know, putting events out on social media, I know a few people already have on the What's On page, but you could get some new members even ahead of term starting by putting on a few introductory sessions, but also some people might not feel comfortable attending big in-person events. So just thinking about what you're putting on and making sure everyone's comfortability levels are catered for. We also say that making sure everyone feels comfortable and welcome is really big part of it, but also socials are a big part of what clubs and societies are, and we're really excited for these events to be coming back in person. And yeah, if there are any events that you have upcoming, please let me know. I'd love to come along, but also to share about some of the good stuff that is happening on campus. But do make sure that these socials are conducted in a positive, safe and equal environment. We advise that to avoid any controversial or possibly offensive games, language and activities, and make sure nobody feels forced and pressured into an activity. Everyone should have the ability to say no without any consequence. When it comes to social themes, love the fact that everyone does fancy dress on a Wednesday, but there are some themes that you may not deem offensive, but others might. So here are a list of potential themes that we do not endorse you taking part in the list below. It could be called graffiti or white t-shirt parties, and these are banned by the SU and SU venues because due to often discriminatory language written on t-shirts. It's when a lot of people write on a t-shirt through marker pen. There was a case at Warwick University a couple of years back where they drawn swastikas all over someone's shirt and used name calling and, you know, stuff that just was very offensive to a lot of people, and it made national news just because, you know, after a few drinks, things may get taken out of context. You may not even know what's written on your shirt, but if you are planning on going to any, like, you won't be allowed into any venues, don't do this as part of your club or society activity because it is against some of our terms. And also look at the language that's being used. Gender bender, often gender bender is an example, but avoid using offensive terms that label your social event. Remember, make sure it's inclusive of all. And then cultural themes. We have a really diverse range of students on campus, which is really exciting as an international uni. But some themes, when you're associating it with drinking, nudity or antisocial behaviour, the culture involved may feel offended. So just think ahead of this, and also be mindful and recognise that your members may not find themed events like sexual or S&M as funny as you do. And then at the bottom is just a link to a case at the University of Leeds Hockey Club. They did a chav night and this made the news for all the wrong headlines. So just think about it first. Is this the right message that you're putting out through a club and theme? There are loads of fancy dress themes that to cover what the 20 weeks of term that don't cover these four. So yeah. So as the Students' Union alcohol policy signed by all sports clubs, and it will be signed by all societies, these will be sent out shortly by DocuSign, but part of that policy states that an initiation and or mothers and daughters, fathers and sons are events in which members or often new members of the club are expected to perform any activity which means of gaining credibility, status or entry into that club or society. Clubs and societies are open for all to join, and that's something I think we should really pride ourselves in, the Essex, that they're open to all. So you shouldn't be putting barriers in place that then can be linked into that initiation. Initiations are banned for so many reasons. Any event where peer pressure is placed upon another member or a particular club may involve the consumption of alcohol, eating concoctions, various food stuff, nudity, or any behaviour that would be deemed humiliating, any activity which includes physical violence. So make sure none of your events are including that sort of stuff and can be deemed an initiation and something someone has to carry out in order to be part of your club or society. Although we strongly do not condone initiations and hazing, we are aware that activities still happen underground. It is important that as a committee member you understand why such activities are not endorsed and should not be conducted. You may seem as harmless and a welcome for new members and something that happens every year, but these have always been the rules. We're just informing you again, as you're now in these roles, if it does come out, there'll be serious consequences taking place. It can also put off potential new members, even those, especially in sport, from playing your sport because they don't want to have to go through that initiation hazing process. We don't want there to be a created uncomfortable or intimidating atmosphere that could ruin someone's experience of that sport, but also their time at university as a whole. It could be seen as bullying and abuse, and at the University of Essex there is a serious zero tolerance policy, and there will be consequences that will be followed up. So yeah, in the past there have been cases where students who have been subjected to initiations and or hazing leaving university, individuals have been arrested and given criminal records, and there have been some cases where students have tragically passed away because of activities they had to perform as part of a university initiation or hazing. The majority of students that arrive at Essex will be 18 years old, though some may be even younger, so just take this into account, as well as this may be some of your members, but they're full-time education, living away from home for the first time, and could be slightly more impressionable and wanting to show off to a senior member of a club or society. So therefore it's vital that you as a senior committee member are respectful and responsible for welcoming to all. This could be small things like making sure you're meeting new members like on squares, which is a lot easier to turn up to than finding 5SW 149. You know, we know the room system's really complicated here, so you don't want to be putting in little barriers like finding the room that you're in or where you're meeting to stop members from turning up. You know, getting a few of your returning members to meet in places like Square 3 outside the SU bar, or if you're walking past accommodation to get to event, stopping outside accommodation building so someone has someone to walk with. You know, it gets dark really early, so just think about these things if you're putting on social events in the evenings, which is probably most likely when people aren't in classes. So just think of the planning process beforehand, and really don't feel the need to conform to tradition, even if it's been passed down from year to year and involves initiations to new members. It doesn't matter if it's always happened and it seems normal. If it is breaking any of the stuff that we have mentioned earlier, there will be consequences, and we don't want it to be your year that has to face it. So some other schemes that run and some useful things to know, through all our SU venues, you can ask for Angela. So that's just a phrase used. You can go up to the bar and speak to a member of staff and just literally ask for Angela. And it's a discreet way of letting staff know either that you're feeling uncomfortable and they can potentially diffuse the situation. It can be used on a night out, but also on a date, or any situation where you just want someone to keep an eye on it or to get involved. We have Nightline on campus. There's the link, and we also have the security desk, which is down on Square 3, right next to the Sub-Zero exit. And we also have Report and Support, which is the university's anonymous reporting system, which you can find online.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think, Liv, you touched on it a little while ago, but the university and the SU has a zero tolerance approach to harassment. You know, that includes sexual harassment, you know, any forms of racism, homophobia, etc. And the Students' Union, will take action, and that action will be taken proportionate to the circumstances. And again, if you see anything happen, if you know of anything that has happened, there is that link again that you can use to report any incidents. Staff and students, this is really a given, and I'm sure this doesn't really apply to anyone here, but for those that sort of need to hear it again, staff and students are expected to be treated and to treat each other with dignity and respect, regardless of all of these protected characteristics. So gender expression, race, political beliefs, disability, pregnancy, maternity, sexual orientation, everything on this list. Like I say, I hope no one in this room needs to hear this, but it's always good to just remind yourself that we should be being inclusive, regardless of anyone's background and of who anyone is.
Cool. So there will be separate training later on in the year around TOR for those involved, but we do have a contract currently outstanding with I Love TOR. But this is a brief breakdown of key stuff you'll need to know as part of your role. Although tour is a holiday for everyone, it is vital that you act responsibly and consider both yours and your members' welfare throughout. Group leaders should promote a positive, safe and equal group throughout the duration of tour. The environment within your club or society should be one where members can say no without any consequence. This links back to initiations and hazing. It still applies on tour. If there is anything you're uncomfortable with or would like to report, please do so immediately to the tour company staff, and familiarise yourself and follow the emergency protocol provided by the tour company. Save local emergency numbers like police, hospital. There'll be more training around tour later on in the year, but some key things to take in. So yeah, for some virtual events, I know you'll probably all be experts with it after the last 18 months online, but some suggestions if you hadn't thought of them yet are like Netflix watch parties where you can watch TV in sync with one another. There's also, you could do club or society game shows. So there's Jackbox and also a version of Would I Lie to You, just a way of getting to know different members in your club or society, almost like a icebreaker beforehand. So again, as I mentioned earlier with Fed, Extra Time and Sock Saturdays, there are other SU events which do not require you to fill out any risk assessment, but just could be good events for you and your members to go along to, and these can be found on the SU What's On page on the website. This is where you also can buy tickets for Sub-Zero events as well. But yeah, at the moment they've got all the football games they're showing in the bar up there. It's where you can get your tickets for Freshers and for Fed. It's got all the timings of other non-ticketed events that are in the bar, and soon we'll have the Colour Dash up there and the Blades and the Sports Quiz that's happening on the 1st of October. So yeah, it's a key web page. I know it's been a year without using it, but remember to get your tickets for events as they will sell out, and to tell your members to as well, because you don't want them missing out on First Fed or anything because they've forgotten to do so.
Cool, thank you. So we're basically at the end now. Thank you for sticking with us. I know it's been a little bit of a long one. It's been very information heavy, but they are just some details for the other training sessions that we do have coming up. And there is obviously the captain's training as well that hopefully you should have received an invite to today, but please email us if you haven't got an invite for that. I believe they've all gone out anyway today. That's for sports only, obviously. I'll head back to this one in a minute, but for now, that is the end of the session. Thank you very much for attending. If you've got any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself now and ask them, or you can pop them in the chat, or you can email us if you think of any later. Tomorrow, the link will go out that includes all of the training slides. So you'll be able to find them on there. They're listed under there, and there'll be some more instructions on how to find certain ones in the email tomorrow. But if you do have nothing else, if you have no questions, yeah, thank you very much for attending. I hope you've learned some good stuff today and enjoy your evening. Thank you.